Hey guys, welcome back to OCD Recovery's YouTube channel. Today I thought I'd make a video talking specifically about magical thinking. I was looking through the videos on the channel and I noticed that magical thinking hasn't really been covered much on the channel, hardly at all really. So I thought I'd make a video right now talking about my experience with magical thinking, what I went through, what type of thoughts I had, different ways it would attack me, how I got through it, how I recovered from it, and basically where I'm at now. So to start off with, what is magical thinking? Basically, magical thinking refers to the idea that you can influence the outcome of specific events by doing something that has no bearing on circumstances. So basically, to put it in simpler terms, for me, my magical thinking was always based on wishing things on people, and it would always attack my mum. Like I said in my previous video, my mum being one of the most important people in my life, OCD is going to go straight for that and it's going to love that. And the intrusive thoughts that I would have towards my mum would be to do with cancer and just wishing harm on her, wishing death on her. I'd get intrusive thoughts, for example, whenever she'd feel unwell or she'd have a cold or she'd feel sick, my mind would instantly go, oh, I hope it's cancer. I hope it's stage 4 cancer and I hope she suffers and I hope she dies, that sort of thing. And it was horrible. They weren't nice thoughts to have. It wasn't a pleasant experience to have or to go through, especially having those types of thoughts towards someone like my mum. It just wasn't nice at all. And there'd be times where I would walk past, for example, a graveyard, and even if I just happened to glance at the graveyard, my mind would instantly go, oh, mum's going to be there soon. And it's just like, it was horrible. I didn't know where these thoughts were coming from. Stuff I would do to try and get rid of the thoughts or to stop me from thinking that thought. My main compulsion would be like shaking my head to get the thought out of my head, or I'd knock on wood. That's I think that's a compulsion that a lot of people do when they're superstitious. They knock on wood. But magical thinking has been around for a very long time. I remember in school, and I'm sure many people watching this have heard this phrase, step on a crack, break your mother's back. That's a very superstitious thing. And not only would my magical thinking attack my mum, but it would also attack my nan sometimes as well. And looking back now, I know exactly why it would attack my nan, because my nan, obviously being an elderly woman in general are more closer to, unfortunately, the end of their life. So of course, again, OCD is going to love that. It's going to go straight for that. Another way magical thinking would affect me would be whenever I'd go on a plane. My mind would instantly say, oh, this will be the last time my family will be alive. This will be the last time I'll be alive. I hope that a terrorist is on this plane and hijacks the plane and we all die. I hope the plane crashes, that sort of thing. And I never really had a fear of flying. I don't even have a fear of flying to this day. I've never really been scared of flying, but I'd always be scared of getting on a plane because of the thoughts I'd be having, because I would just think that because I've thought that, now it's going to happen, or there's a possibility that could happen just because I've thought it. And throughout my journey of magical thinking, I've now come to realize that, to put it quite simply, we're just not that powerful. We don't have the ability to make events happen just by thinking it, because if that was the case, I could sit here and wish for £1 million and my bank account would still look the same. Wouldn't make any difference whatsoever. I could wish for anything. I could wish for fame. I could wish for, like I said, fortune. I could wish for a whole lot of things. Doesn't mean I'd get it. My life would still be the same now, regardless. So, to put it quite simply, like I said, we don't have the ability to create outcomes. We don't have the ability to make events happen simply by thinking it or by wishing it. And to put it quite simply, the way I overcome magical thinking, like, it took a while for me to overcome it, because and as I said in my previous video, I had it from a very, very young age, from when I was very, very little. And I just didn't know what was happening. I never really knew about intrusive thoughts really at the time when I was little. Of course, I had no idea what it was. Even as a teenager, I never really knew or understood what it was. I was so confused at what was going on in my mind. And it wasn't until I looked at some of Rob's tweets on his OCD recovery Twitter account, and I saw him talking about magical thinking, and there was a tweet he said in regards to planes, and it was along the lines of, if you think you can bring a plane down simply by just thinking it, try and purposely think it every time you see a plane in the sky. And then it literally just changed my perspective instantly. Like, I started thinking the thoughts on purpose, started to just think them on purpose and not do any compulsions. And some of the compulsions I would do to stop the thoughts would be shaking my head to try and get the thought out of my head. I would, like I said, I'd knock on wood. I would also, I'm not religious in any way, but I would also, I remember one compulsion I did, I'd have to touch wood or knock on wood, and I'd have to say, touch wood and God forbid that it don't happen, and I know it won't happen. And I guess a little bit of just right OCD would be thrown into this, because I'd have to make sure that when I say that it sounded perfect, because if I thought it sounded off in any way, I'd have to say it again and again, because if it felt like it sounded off, then that outcome that I wished for would eventually happen. So yeah, it was horrible. Even saying goodnight to my mum, like, usually people would be like, oh, night mum, see you in the morning, but for me I'd have to be like, night mum, see you in the morning forever. Like, I'd literally have to say see you in the morning forever, because if I didn't say see you in the morning forever, I'd feel like she wouldn't wake up the next morning, so I'd have to say see you in the morning forever to stop her from dying, basically. And looking back, I just look and think, it was just so stupid that I could think that way, that I could even, do those compulsions. Like, it's really mad when I think about it. And even going back to when I mentioned about the graveyards, I look back and I think, wow, like, I used to walk past graveyards, and a graveyard is like one of the most peaceful places that you could find, and I can't even get peace. Like, I can't even get peace at one of the most peaceful places that you could find. Like, it made no sense. And like, going back to me not being religious or believing in God in any way, even times when I would like look up at the sky, I'd instantly get a thought, God, please let so-and-so happen. God, please let my mum get cancer, blah, blah, blah. And cancer in itself was a very, very big trigger for me. Like, I couldn't watch anything to do with cancer. I couldn't watch any adverts that came on about cancer. I couldn't watch, I think it's over here, the show's called Casualty. I think it's called that. I couldn't watch that. I couldn't watch any shows to do with hospitals, because they would just trigger the thoughts. Yeah, and like, even if I found out someone had cancer, my mind would go, oh, I hope they die, I hope they suffer, I hope it's terminal, that sort of thing. And yeah, so it was a very, very hard thing to process what was going on in my mind, because I never really, like I said, I didn't know what it was, I didn't really know what was going on. And just the shame and the guilt that came from them was just horrible, because even though I couldn't control it, I still felt very guilty for it. And I remember one time I was round my friend's house one evening, and the thoughts and the guilt and the shame got so overwhelming that I just had to leave, and I didn't want my friend at the time to know that I was having these specific thoughts, so I just made up an excuse that I just felt sick and I just needed to go home, like, because I just felt really unwell. And I remember it to this day. I remember walking home and I was just trying to fight back tears, because I was just so overwhelmed. I was so guilty and so shameful for having these thoughts. And I went home that night and I just confessed all the thoughts I was having to my mum, and bless her, she was surprisingly so supportive, you know, because I just feel like at the time I just felt like no one would want to hear that you're having these thoughts about them. You know, it's not a nice thing to find out, you know. And I know deep down that my mum didn't like that I was having those thoughts. You know, I knew that deep down, but at the same time, like I said, she was very, very supportive. And also I want to make it clear that confession, it doesn't help at all. OCD would always find a way around that. It did with my magical thinking. I never got relief from it. I was still having the same thoughts, and I thought if I confessed them to my mum and my mum was okay with me having these thoughts, it would go. It wasn't the case at all. Because I was still scared of thoughts. I was still scared, and I was still shameful, and I still had the mindset that it was bad to think these thoughts. So going back to how I got over it, basically just thinking the thoughts on purpose, saying them out loud, and just not doing any compulsions like the knocking on wood or the shaking my head to get the thought out, to get rid of the thought. I'll just simply say it or think it, and then just sit with the uncomfortable feelings. And it really, really did help me change my mindset on magical thinking like that. Like, it was a very, very quick change. And basically now where I'm at with magical thinking doesn't bother me at all. Like, I can literally sit here and wish, you know, I could wish cancer on anyone. I could wish it on myself. I wouldn't really have a feeling of guilt or shame, because I know that just because I thought it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And if I did think it and then it just happened out of nowhere, that wouldn't be because I thought it. That just would have been a very, very big coincidence. It wouldn't have happened because I thought it, basically. So yeah, that's where I am with magical thinking. Doesn't affect me whatsoever. I'm completely recovered from that, and I know that magical thinking will never ever affect me again. So this video is just to simply give people hope. If you are struggling with magical thinking, or if you are struggling with similar thoughts, there is hope. You can overcome it. And this isn't to say that you will never get those thoughts again, because I still do get those thoughts from time to time, but there's just zero effect, no effect whatsoever. It's almost as if I never had magical thinking, which is insane to even say or to even think about. But yeah, and it just gives me hope as well in regards to my POCD, which I will make another video about, because I am not 100% recovered from that yet, but I have had moments of what you could call freedom, and I am slowly getting out of it, and I am slowly getting on the other side with my POCD. And it just makes me think and gives me hope myself that if I can get to a place where I'm at now with magical thinking, where it has no effect on me whatsoever, where I'm completely recovered from it, and I can just think whatever and have no reaction to it whatsoever, then there's no reason why I can't get to that place with my POCD or any other themes that may arise in the future. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and listen to me. My next video will be about my journey with POCD, how it started, my experience with it, similar to this video with my magical thinking. But it's gonna be mainly talking about, I'm gonna go into detail, like I said, about my experience, but the main focus on the video will be about my specific exposures that I had to do and how they were basically the stepping stone to getting better, and how they really, really benefited me. And yeah, so look forward to that video. But again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and listening to me. It'd be interesting to know some of your stories with magical thinking, or some of the thoughts you've been having. Like I said, I try and read every single comment and try and reply to them as best as I can. So yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your story, or like I said, to hear some of the thoughts you have had, or to hear maybe a recovery story that you'd like to share about your magical thinking. Just comment below and I'd love to hear it. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for listening, and take care.